You can ask me right now. So the ribs, so there's a little joint here between this part and this part, and there's a little joint here between the vertebral body and there. Yeah. And then you've all, well, not him, but these guys have got something there. Some of them, see how some of them go to 2? And I think, I don't know, it's very, some books describe it differently. But, you know, again, you've really got to get the skeleton and go, what do they do? So where this is coming from, why we've got the skeleton out, is I've been really thinking about, Carol, I'm sure you don't mind, Carol saying, I've got to learn to calm myself to do FI. No? Was her comment to me yesterday. So it's like she's in the pit. No? She's in the pit to even think about doing FI. So it's not getting to the place of actually doing it. For Carol at the moment, it's like simply to think about doing FI, I'm overwhelmed. It's too much more for me. And it's great. She knows she has to calm the system. So how do we put bits in that Carol can begin to feel more comfortable with doing FI? So just as you have to do with your clients, or how do we nudge her so that it's okay to feel overwhelmed, but she doesn't stay there? Because overwhelmed's part of it. So one of the things, and I was thinking about it, and I thought, because Carol said to me yesterday that when we're doing this, when we're actually, when we were doing the lateral flexion and looking at it, that you sort of got that. It was then transferring that into doing FI. So I can already see that for Carol, there's a really big difference in her mental maps, if you like, between FI and ATM. So to me, they're exactly the same thing. I don't actually have a scheme of this is... So FI to me purely means when I'm working one-on-one with someone. And ATM for me probably means I'm working with a group of people. I think it's happened over time as well. No? But whether it's because I was already doing one-on-one work before I came to this. So again, but going back to that, so I had mental maps already from being a physio. I know how to touch people. Do you know what I mean? I'm familiar with putting my hands on people. I'm familiar with developing relationship with people, sort of getting some information out of them in a particular way. I had to unlearn heaps. Mine was really having to change my idea of what touch was and what communication was, and having a big picture. And you're all coming from the same thing. And I know you've heard me say that I understood anatomy because I was a physio, but it was abstract only. I couldn't put things together, honestly. That the hip had something to do with what happened in the shoulder, that had something to do with what happened in the low back, that had something to do, and that's still endemic in the medical profession because you're trained to make a diagnosis, you're trained to find the thing that's wrong. And it's still endemic that I'll get clients in who, especially if they've been in a car accident or things, that they will be told that their back pain has got nothing to do with their neck pain. Or their knee pain's got nothing to do with. And that's, I don't get angry, it's just the system. That's how it works, that we tend to pull things, and that's where we're coming in and trying to give people a sense that everything influences everything else. So, I was, again, going back to Carol, and I was thinking, so what is it? So I get an idea that you've probably got a bit of a mismatch between ATM and FI. And I was thinking, and this is sort of from watching Carol do her own ATM as well, I wonder, because when Carol's had conversations with me, I've discovered this. Do you know what I mean? Or I've discovered that I've got ribs, or I've discovered that I've got this. And I'm wondering how clear yet is Carol's picture in herself of how all these things join together. That she knows that they all join together. Yeah? As an abstract concept, she absolutely understands that they all join together. But in her experience, that map is still forming. Yeah? It's still coming together to really sense that, these really are connected together. So what I thought, and Carol, this is for you, I think it'd be really good for you to do your FI on the skeleton. Yeah, as a start. Do you know what I mean? To actually have this. And especially if there's a subtext in there, and this is absolutely me saying this, that in there, that there's something in Carol too, that if I don't understand it, I'm going to mess someone up. I'm going to mess them up. If I don't get it, what am I going to be doing to the person that I've got my hands on?
Oi, oi, oi. I'm going to be the orange box Nazi for the next 10 minutes.
Or worse still, that they might not feel anything at all, any change at all. In my mind.
But these are the maps. Do you know what I mean? These are the things. What is our great? What are our fears? What are these? So the thing I love about Carol is that she has an awareness of what these are, that they're already, she can articulate them in a way, these things that get in a way. And it took me many years to be able to articulate the many things that were getting in my way. So it's really thing. So if we go back to lateral flexion, which you were doing yesterday. No? And so again, you could see much as we did the day before, most of the ATMs yesterday were directed to using your limbs to move the bigger part. Does that make sense? That we're using sort of the more distal parts of ourselves to get something happening in the middle. That's really easy in ATM because most people are much more aware of their arms and legs, and for many of us this is a big mystery. Yeah? As you can see, evidenced even by all those kids' drawings yesterday, that not a lot have pelvises, yeah? And very few have an idea of how many joints are in here, even though abstractly they know. Most people, if they looked at a drawing and go, oh yeah, there's a spine and it's got all these vertebrae in there, but that they all move separately to each other. But I'm not saying that's 5 to 6 years old. How many of you, before you came to this training? Have we got, sorry, by that woman.
I noticed that when I went to the gym this morning that I thought about the illustrations and the dots, and when I did my shoulder press, it's so stupid that I realized that because I'm always thinking about my lats and shoulders down type thing because of Pilates, in my head, I know that my shoulders are here, but they would always move from here. So that I was like, oh, that's why I always get a stiff neck. And
yeah, can you imagine?
because I'm like, lifting like that. But as soon as I went, my shoulder joint is here, and then lifted it, I was like, oh. It lifts. It's on top of my rib, not in the middle of my ribs. So, yeah, even though I know where it is and I teach people where it is, on myself, it's here. That's where my shoulder is, at my lat.
And remember, Feldenkrais always said, you will move according to your self-image. Yeah? So wherever you think your knee is, wherever you think your hip is, wherever you think your ribs are, that's where you will map them from.
I've since we did that pelvic clock with you in Sydney, which was amazing, and I discovered where my actual hip joints were, I've been testing putting dots on, because in one of my ATMs I put dots on the spine, so it was interesting yesterday. But I've got a bit of a sore fascia, and I was lying in bed thinking, I've got to get up, it's going to be sore, and I thought, okay, let's put some dots on. So I put a dot on each hip, in the joint, and one at the back of each time before I get out of bed, I test where I'm going to put the dot. And I put it there, and I got out of bed, and I walked without any pain. So that's the sort of testing I'm doing, But it didn't last, obviously, because, because I didn't know where all the other dots should be.
But you were still building a relationship map. Yeah, she was building connection. She was looking for relationship, not just for her foot. No? She was expanding her image of what was involved in movement. I could see you doing that. Can't you see all the kids he's working with? He's just going to have dots all over them.
That was really interesting, what you're talking about there, and what we've been doing the last couple of days, because a guy I've been working with, my son's friend, for the last 4 years. We've done movement stuff together, and I've been teaching him how to squat for 4 years, and he's always had these problems. He'll stop somewhere, and I'm going like, move from here, move from here. 2 weeks ago, that's why what you're saying is so interesting for me, is 2 weeks ago, I realized that every time he does it, I'm telling him, there's your hip, there's your hip. And he's going, okay. So he puts his hands here. I thought he was just doing that because he was bending. He's doing that because that's where his hip is. I was even pushing. Like I'd get up to him and push in and go, there's your hip, push back there. Oh, okay, yeah. And he'd stop here because he's pushing here, so there's nothing left.
But the interesting thing is just think a little bit bigger. So if you think it's here, what do your shoulders do? If you think that your pelvis is your hips, they come forward and down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if that stays part of the picture, he can't find his hips.
I never thought of that. Okay. I don't know. I did. I picked it up. As if I wouldn't know that.
So thank you. Your little thing this morning about your shoulder, please.
When I was saying what I want to ask for that FI, I was going through my brain going, I've got this question, I've got this question, I've got this question. And I was like, and I have not an injury, like my shoulder did really well. Someone jumped off my shoulder, it came out, went back in, and now
and look how she's moving it as she's talking about the story. Yeah?
Yeah. And then I was like, is it my stomach or my thoracic? I went, I'm going to ask, with this shoulder thing, what's the relationship with my entire body? And then I'll get a full over, once over.
But hopefully that's where her practitioner's coming from. I might only be working. It might feel like my hands are, if someone's observing that my hands are only here and here, but that big picture is there all the time.
The question then is what do I say? Or because I know when I've got my hand on someone that I can extend their sense by just moving my hand to another part of their body. But if I'm in an ATM, I know how to do that because I've practiced ATM, but for general public, I need to know what to say. So those little pieces of how to pay attention to more of yourself doing the movement are really important to me. And Glenn gave me his line this morning. And so every time anyone does an ATM in here or gives me an instruction, I've got all these extra words, but the extra words actually give me more sense of how I move. So they actually build my self-image, which is me. So me is arriving more and more and more.
Yeah,
and that's what I'd like to
We'll
look
do
at.
something specifically on that later this week in terms of your ATM teaching. Really looking at how do you begin to see the big picture of what you're looking for in someone. Okay, so let's go back to side bending. So what did we decide? It was really great. You all came. Weight shift's a huge one. Yeah, right and left, huge for side bending. If you don't let something side bend, try shifting your weight. And that's one way around it. You're going to use your hips, but nothing's really, which isn't, you can walk that way, but it's not going to be great. So it's a lot about this left and right. So what I thought we'd do, because you're going to get in your partners again and do something with things. Now, Mr. Skeleton, so all the things you came up with were great. Yeah. So, and again, just be really clear that if you're saying reach for a light bulb, they're going to contextualise that as reach for a light bulb, which is fine, but then have you transferred that action to simply reaching for a light bulb rather than reaching up to get something to the right or reaching up or reaching above you to get something. So just be clear that sometimes if you get too specific in your description, you're going to limit them transferring their learning simply by the language that you've used. Okay, so what are some of the things that I could look for to do side bending on the skeleton? Where would I want to go? Well, first of all, I've already checked. He can move here. He can move here. Yeah. I know that those key points we've already got availability in. So what could I do? What could I look at first? Just ideas. There's no right or wrong here. So looking at the pelvis. Yeah. So as I'm looking at the pelvis moving, what am I thinking of? No, go. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, that's one way. I can be thinking of the contact with the ground. Yeah? So I could be checking this going, and I'm thinking, how does that go into the ground but not get stuck into the ground? That there could be a movement along the ground as I move his pelvis. What else could I be paying attention to? Is something happening in the hip joints as I do this? Or, because I'm going to bias it too by where my hands are, aren't I? So I'm back here. Yeah. What else could I be asking?
Does the movement go through?
Is the knee?
Is the knee responding to that? What's their knee doing? Is anything happening in their knee as they do that? What else in the leg could I be paying attention to? The foot. What's happening in the foot? Is the foot coming along for the ride? So at the moment, I'm thinking, what's happening below that could help? Oh. So if I go down to the foot, what would be the movement of the foot that would go with lateral flexion? Little bit Inversion, eversion. Yeah, which is sort of at there. But again, you don't have to. But so if your foot was standing, can you feel that it'd be a little bit right, a little bit left? That would be the movement that would go with the lateral flexion. Huh? A little bit movement to the right, a little bit movement to the left. Yeah, can you all feel that? Yeah, that there's something about that movement that lets your pelvis move, that lets, and then feel what happens if you really hold that rigidly. What happens to your hip and your lower back? You can't move it. Yeah, and this is what you're gradually learning to do. How do I spread my attention to feel where is it that they're not including in their image? What is it that's not coming along for the ride? It's simple, but you have to be asking the question to sense it. So, and just be aware that I could also move my ankle, and that could be a very small movement or it could be a big movement. So
where are you going to hold to get the information?
Yeah, where am I going to hold to look? And can you see now the knees making a little bit of a... So I'm thinking of connecting that through, and he's so clever, it's going through to his hip as well. Huh? And maybe, you know, I can't feel it, so I go, oh, the foot, so I just do a little bit there. So you could see what the, yeah, and I could think I can just, and there's this a little bit more rotation, but I'm still getting that side left right movement. Left right, left right. Huh? This ability to know that I'm going a little bit away from my middle. Huh? So there's the action. If I start to do a bigger movement that's rotation, which is a lot, that's rotation I'm asking for now. Huh? Does that make sense? I'm asking the pelvis to do something very different. So it's just this sort of little movement. So then I come back, and again I was thinking of that leg, but then I'm also thinking what's happening in the underneath hip and the underneath knee and the underneath ankle. Are they going along for the ride as well? And it's simply a question. Yeah? Then I've got, which you haven't done yet, so maybe we could come through the sit bone. Yeah? This is a really powerful lever too. So if I know that something's happening here, I could come through, or I could come through there and join them together a little bit. Huh? So I'm just joining dots here. And if I feel they know this and not this, that I could do the pelvis and then see if the foot comes along. Or maybe if I can feel they know the foot and not the pelvis, I could go foot first and then can the pelvis come along. Huh? So I'm just sort of feeling my way through this process. And to then also feel this is side bending as well, if I'm going to come this way. Yeah. Now, you might remember one of the things I said yesterday was that I didn't see a lot of differentiation happening in a lot of the little things you did. So differentiation would be that my foot could go up and my pelvis could come this way. Or my foot could go down and my pelvis could go that way. It's still the same plane, if you like. I'm just getting them to go in different directions, and then again I come back and say, oh, for him, he loves it. Like that. That made a big difference, just doing that little differentiation. So that's sort of things you can do with the leg. What could we do with the arm about side bending? Sorry? shoulder blade, yeah, just as we started with the pelvis, we could go to the shoulder blade, no? So we could really just, and again, we're going to get the person's arm hopefully in a position where it's light. Huh? So if this was really heavy on the table, it's not going to be that easy to move here. So where can I position them? Is it there? Is it there? Yeah, where for the person does it make sense? Where I can begin to feel now as I take the shoulder blade down and up, what happens? And to remember skeletally that this is going to come in at the sternum. Now, the shoulder girdle is going to attach at the sternum. So it might make sense that I just have a finger on the sternum, just to see what happens there. What's going to happen here? Does it move? He doesn't know this. As I do this with this skeleton, so he knows this, the sternum moves a little bit up and down, but nothing happens here. So there's no point staying there. It's not happening. So what were some of the other things that you did? Maybe I could lift the head. Yeah. And I could join the head and the shoulder blade together. Yeah? These are all ATM moves. Yeah? Or I could differentiate them.
Can I check differentiation? So when you say differentiate, you mean we're going to move it this way and now we're going to move it that way. So you know the
it's in the opposite. It's not going in the same direction.
Okay. Thanks.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we would normally expect if I lifted my head that that shoulder blade would go down. No? There will be some, but this for some people, it, you know, really helps them because you're changing relationships in the musculature, really.
Okay.
Yeah. So I could bring the shoulder toward the head as I lift it. And I know the head is light to lift because remember I checked at the top, at the beginning. Look, he's much more mobile there now. Yeah. So there's another differentiation. What could I do with the arm? I could put it over his head. Yeah. I've got to check how I get it over his head. Huh?
What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, is it easy to get it there?
Yeah. So if you notice any resistance.
I don't go there. Yeah, I'm going to go back and find something easier. Yeah? Maybe I could do a little bit, even if I got his hand here, and that elbow could begin to go down a little bit. Yeah? There's lots of approximations that you can go through. But you're sort of clearly trying to get this sideways bending. Because what's going to be the thing that gets most in the way of side bend or movements of the torso? Muscle, 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 and more muscle. Yeah? The skeleton doesn't stop movement, but muscles do. Especially the big muscles. The big muscles that join big parts of us together are much more likely to be stopping this fine movement that we want. So could you feel as you're sitting there, if you tighten your belly on your right, how easy is it to side bend? To the right. It's not very easy. You can if you go from your hip. But in terms of getting the torso to do the movement. So much of what we're after is getting all of this to be so much more available for movement. And you're all still finding that in yourselves, in your ATM practice as well. So what are the ribs going to do in side bending?
Squidge together and move apart.
Because it's a really interesting image. If you have that they're really coming together, they're actually coming toward each other like that. So you've got to get that it's a down movement. No? So again, this is a mental map. If you have the idea that I'm bringing them all together.
I'm thinking of an accordion and you squeeze it from one end.
So these are, and that's where you need to come to the skeleton more. What's the skeleton going to do to get this? And yeah, they will, but they're not squeezing. Huh? They're just gently all coming together. And can you feel that's going to make a difference to what can happen in here? Huh? So one of the things I'm feeling for pretty quickly is the ground. I always want the ground, which is what you said, Joel. But I want to have an image in there of where are the vertebra? Vertebra. Where are those vertebral bodies? Is something moving in there? And then you could go along all the different ribs, yeah? Giving them a sense. You could use the breathing. So what's going to happen in this part to do side bending?
The top or the bottom?
Well, how's the spine going to move to do side bending? Yeah, but what's it going to do?
What? Can you say that again? She said discs.
No, I said, what is the spine? Can you imagine what's going to happen in all these little joints? I know they're going to move. How are they going to move?
They're going to tilt, yeah. One side's going to get thinner and the other side's going to get fatter, which is the tilt.
The spaces increase on one side, yeah. But what you've got to realise is different parts of the spine are more available to do that than others. Yeah? So the thoracic is designed for rotation. Rotation, 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 and more rotation. Side bending mainly happens in the lumbar spine. Yeah, little bits through here. Yeah, obviously, you know, if the ribs are coming down like that, it is going to do, but it's really the ribs and the sternum that do most of the swinging to let the thoracic spine. So you can feel that if you imagine like him that your sternum's attached to your vertebral bodies and you try and side bend, there's not much side bending, that you really have to have that ability to swing this.
Yeah.
Huh? To really swing the ribs and the sternum relative, and that's where the rib mobility comes in. Huh? Yeah? To let that side bending start to happen through this area. This has a lot of side bending in it here. And if you actually came and looked at the way the joints are lined up, you'd see that. And this also has a lot of side bending. So if I want to go into the spine, I've really got to be clear in what I think happens, because here I know that the vertebral bodies can do a lot of side bending. Here I know probably the more I can get the ribs and sternum to join in a little bit. I'm going to get a lot further than coming in just on these vertebral bodies and trying to get them to do the side bending. No, they're just not going to be that available for it. No? So you can, that's, and then how does your head get light? The head gets light when these big, powerful muscles down here do the lifting for you. But they can't do that if they're tight. Just can't do it. Yeah. So if you see that that won't happen to do that, you'll see people doing all sorts of things like trying to do a big lift with their pelvis. And so you're really looking to distribute that load. Another thing you can do is, you know, get their leg long and do the same movement. That often really helps people to get a clearer image than having the leg bent. So, do you want to have a go? Just thinking about, and Carol, you're still going to have the skeleton today to do it on. Yeah. So again, go back to your groups of 4. You probably want, let's all work inside lying today. Yeah. The ones you did with the lateral flexion yesterday. Yeah, the side bending that you did yesterday with your group. Side lying. Yeah? So again, today, sorry, I just sent you off a bit too quick. You're going to have a function, you're going to look at them in walking. Look at them in walking, thinking about, and your sorting tool is, do I see any side bending there? Is that do I see, and if you don't see it, that's fine. You just simply, is there a component of side bending in their walking? Then get them to do an activity. You saw lots yesterday you can choose from about bringing lateral flexion. Then go back. Let's just do it on one side. Huh? Okay. And then you come back to the activity and you come back to walking. And you've got 30 minutes.
Come here. You can do it. No, I can't. Do it this way.
Does that make